to electric transmission line siding and the KCC's timeline for issuing an order. The contents of this bill were essentially moved to another vehicle. So Senate Bill 92 is essentially a conference shell for you to use if needed. Mr. Chairman, I can describe 380 in further or pass out a conference chart or anything that you got.
So while he's passing that out, I'll do a little talking here, and then if Nick wants to add anything to this, we can kind of go from there. But so we had 380. It went over to you guys, and coming back to us, what I'm trying to do is to be fair and equitable to all interested parties as much as possible. So what's happening here is that all retail electric suppliers are back in the bill, and we're only working through part of this bill, so we're narrowing the scope of what's going on here. So the part that we're keeping in is the fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory rates and services that I think you'll read in the bill there. The part that we're taking out is the rate base will be allowed. That's going to be coming out of this. So that was the complicated part. So what we're trying to do is to get part of this so that if you had a mom and pop shop and they had someone across the street that was a co-op or a municipal, that their pricing would be the same. Or not the same, but reasonable on what's going on with that. So that's kind of the intent of the bill, and I'll give you time to look that over, or however you want to do this, Mr. Chairman. So
I'll start off with some questions. So, because I've been gone a few days here.
yeah. Yes.
So
You didn't have that, did you?
There's also some more information.
Yeah. I thought he'd given that out to you.
I think I've got the up-to-date one. So, okay. The part you put back on, shall offer fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory rates and services. Hang on. This shall be continued. We just got called to the House.
We'll see you gentlemen in a little bit. list, so we get rolling, is there's two pieces of paper you have. These two right here. So you hang on to these two. Our Senate offer is on the white one here that's in the little box up there, so that you can understand that. And then, Nick, you might, if you would, kind of go from this point and describe that down for us, okay?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and committee members, so what you see on that balloon document with the Senate offer, I just want to note that the current version of the bill is the as amended by House committee version with, and there's a lot of markup in that and a lot of bold text. And you see in this balloon document, this is the as amended by Senate committee version. So the Senate offer is, the offer is to recede from the House amendments. So if you look at the sheet, the conference committee comparison chart, really the bulk of that offer to recede from the House amendments involves the application of the type of utility. So the Senate is proposing to go back to having it include all retail electric suppliers as opposed to only pertaining to investor-owned electric utilities. So that's the bulk of the offer. The other part of the Senate offer is to maintain the House position on the sunset date and maintain the House position on the legislative review component. So as you can see in the balloon document, the Senate is offering to maintain that House position, not include that legislative review component, and keep the House's sunset date in there. The next part of the offer is to maintain the House position on the exemption language that appears in the underlying bill in subsection D3. And you can see that on page 2, the House added that amendment that it doesn't apply to charging stations that for utilities if they're required to be owned or operated pursuant to federal, state law, or an order of the KCC. So that the Senate is proposing to keep that House position on that one. And then lastly, the Senate is proposing kind of a different, neither one of you had this completely in there. The House made some changes regarding rate basing of charging stations. The Senate is proposing just to remove that subsection C regarding rate base. So the bill would then, excuse me, would then essentially be a bill that establishes that utilities have to be fair and non-discriminatory in their practices toward other entities offering EV charging services. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify any confusion.
Mr. Chairman, you got any questions?
Okay. The part that was added back in line 18, section 3 there, retail electric supplier means any person, firm, corporation, muni, association, cooperative, et cetera. So they're all back in here. And then it goes down to right below that in B, talking about the shall offer fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory rates and services. When we negotiated through this, everybody was telling me that was language from the KCC. So if we add that back in, is the KCC now going to start regulating co-ops and munis? Or does that at least open the door?
So nothing, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is that a question for me? So nothing in this bill directs the KCC to exert jurisdiction over this provision here. So the KCC, there's nothing in here that would tell the KCC to exert jurisdiction and be the determiner of what's reasonable under this provision. Likewise, any other KCC jurisdiction would need to come through a legal requirement or pursuant to a provision of law in some other statute to govern co-ops and municipal utilities.
I appreciate the question. I think that's important to know.
It is.
But in this case, I think the language, although it mirrors it, doesn't bring anybody else in. There's nothing to say that they would have authority.
So, Mr. Chairman, whatever you want to do, that's what I would tell you.
No, that was just the general question. So Now we go back, or down to line 27, which is 3C as in Charlie. Any cost or expenses incurred by a retail electric supplier to construct, install, own, operate, or maintain fast charging stations shall not be included in the rate base of such retail electric suppliers. We're striking that. So what is there other provisions for them to recover their cost? Is there any limit? My concern is we're going to put the electric companies will put facilities in for retail charging stations. To me, it looks like, so to speak, free of charge to the electric station owners, and it's going to be everybody in this room that has to pay the rate case to pay for it. Is that the case?
So if you look at that today, that's what's going on today. So if we didn't have this bill, that's the way it works. After this bill, it's going to be the same. So that's really the part we're cutting out of this and trying to focus on that fair and reasonable pricing. Would you say, Nick, is that the way that would be?
So kind of back to that jurisdictional question, with regard to rate base, of the KCC under current law has authority and jurisdiction over investor-owned utilities, and then until that law becomes effective, there's one other utility that they currently have jurisdiction over that you recently changed. But so the KCC would have jurisdiction over this rate base determination for those investor-owned utilities. With regard to rate base for municipals and co-ops, as the chairman said, the status quo is the board of trustees of the cooperative or the governing body of the municipal electric utility would be determining those items. And this would remove that prohibition that would prohibit them from rate basing it.
That's what they was after originally, and we're taking that out of there.
Okay. So if I may continue on that, just for the sake of discussion, I want to pick on Evergy. I don't know if they're in the room, but Evergy, to my knowledge, they get a 9.3% guaranteed return on equity. So if we've got several mom and pop charging stations, suppliers, and they want Evergy to go out and supply electric facilities to all of these, who ends up paying that bill? Because aren't they they're going to kick it back on a new rate case so that they can get their 9.3% for whatever multi-million-dollar expenses they incurred to put charging stations in. And I want somebody to tell me how that's fair to everybody in my district. Well, you're for some reason we're wanting it struck out. So I guess that's the reason I'm focusing on it.
Sure.
So what is this bill trying to accomplish in its amended form?
I would say there was two pieces to this, and the rate base is going to be gone. That's why we're striking that. What we're trying to do is a fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory rates and services. So that's what we're after, is that mom and pop isn't charging one price, and across the street, they're selling electricity to mom and pop, and their rate being cheaper. So it's trying to keep the price at the electric charging thing fair and reasonable.
If I may, is just there's concern of the amount of leeway that this bill in its current form opens up. So I understand, again, to pick on Evergy, we've got the KCC regulating them. since it specifically puts munis and co-ops into it, who's going to regulate them?
Are you talking about the rate base part of it?
Yeah, well, if we strike C
If we strike C,
and whatever co-op goes out and puts a whole bunch of these stations in,
yeah.
who's regulating what they can turn around and charge your customers?
So if they went out today, I go back to that statement of, today, they could go do whatever they want to do. They could go build 200 stations, whatever they want to do. And that's going to stay the same through that process. So there isn't anything we can really do about that. So that would be my answer to that. We're trying to focus on the pricing at the charging station. The other part of it, there's no way to address that now,
Not in this bill.
not in this bill. Yeah.
So tell me again then specifically what this bill is trying to accomplish. Because I've got it, I'm sorry, but I'm stuck in my head saying this is a bill looking for a problem. And I'm really hung up on that.
Where would the problem be?
That's what I'm asking.
Well,
What are we trying to truly accomplish with this? Because originally co-ops and munis wanted out of it, and now they want back in it. And then we strike out some language that says you can go charge whatever you please.
So what we're after here is working on the pricing at the charging station to try to keep that fair and reasonable and non-discriminatory rates and services.
Okay. So
That's what
charging,
we're,
not from the supplier, but at the charging station itself, the retail side.
right.
Okay. Which we've heard testimony in committee that it was, the one that was testifying, it was about 59 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
I believe Tesla's averaging about 35. You've got several others that are 30 to 46 cents range or so.
Yeah.
So there's already a wide spread on that. So, yes.
Thank you. When you're quoting those charges, it sounds to me like those are the charges that a charging station would charge. Okay, too many charges.
That's correct. If I may, that's correct. But I think that's what
So you could say there's ChargePoint or there's Tesla, and they're in competition with each other. What I think this bill is trying to do is say that the electricity that those entities pay for is all at the same rate. So Tesla could say, we're charging a little bit more, but you can get your car charged 2 times faster. So we think it might be worth it to you to pay 45 cents instead of 39 cents, you know, whatever it is. But so the charging stations themselves can compete. But what we don't want is the electric utility to offer them different rates, to say to Tesla, oh, if you give a car to each of our board members, we'll give you a cheaper rate. Okay, maybe I shouldn't, but
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
until then, it was pretty reasonable.
So if I may, on that comment, are we looking strictly at the what I'm going to call wholesale rates from the electric providers to the charging station owners?
I would say yes to that.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Okay, and if we're trying to make it fair, I don't see anywhere in this bill where it says they shall charge 10 cents or 17 cents or whatever it is. I don't see any of that, just fair and reasonable.
It's fair and reasonable and non-discriminatory and services to all entities providing similar services. So you would have to charge Tesla the same amount that you charge ChargePoint, that you charge, so it's you can't, as a retail supplier, discriminate between that. And I think you would also have to charge yourself. Right.
Does that need to show up in the bill? Because that does not.
Nick, what's your opinion on that?
I mean, I don't have an opinion on that, Mr. Chairman, but I think you're right, in that this is after the retail sale of electricity to serve independently owned charging stations. So it's all about that service from the utility to those independently owned charging stations, and then also how that interacts with utilities that also may maintain their own charging stations, and the service, the electric service, and the cost of that service to serve those stations.
So I think, ChargePoint may be the service that's offered by Evergy, but I'm charged for that electricity. And I think this would be saying that they have to offer the rates that they're including in their charges and make them the same as what they're providing to other providers.
For conversation purposes, what about predatory pricing? If they offered their rates way low, or so they could compete across the street with a different rate.
Isn't that what we're trying to avoid? Is to say that, I mean, when you say predatory pricing, you're
Lowballing.
right, but they would have to be charging themselves the same rates that they're charging. That's the intent. So if there's any better way to say it, the intent is really.
But the way you're describing it is not really, after with the changes, is not in the bill. So do we have to add an amendment in here to the bill to address what you just said?
Why is it not in the bill if we're saying that a retail electric supplier that provides, owns, operates, or maintains that fast charging station? So that's what you're talking about, the supplier that is supplying electricity to their own changes shall offer those rates and services to all entities providing similar services. This is like lines 21 through 24. So I think that's what we're saying is if you maintain a fast charging station for public use, you have to offer the same sort of rates. You can't give yourself a cheaper rate in that charge.
And I see exactly where you're reading that. So, but then I'm still back to, in the case of an IOU or an Evergy, we've got the KCC to regulate that. In the case of a muni or a co-op, what safeguards are there? That's my hang up.
So I've always heard that electric cooperatives are the groups that manage themselves. And so I think this would be part of the discussion of their budget. So they would have to report to the members of that co-op that part of the cost is what they're doing. I know that when they install solar panels, they say, they have, here's what we invested, here's what we're getting back from this. So I think they would have to do the same thing. And then the munis, we're going to fix with changes to property tax.
Where does it say that in here?
The other thing I might say to you, I spent a lot of time talking to everybody about this, and I haven't found anybody that's against this. So this is a compromise kind of thing, so.
for what it's worth, I talked to the originator of the bill, and they said they're not happy with it, but they're okay with it. That's correct. That's correct. Okay. So, would you please give us 5 minutes alone? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us some time alone. I think everybody on this side is in agreement. We've got concerns about it. We think the bill needs additional work, but we're willing to compromise with this. But I would really like, before we have a vote, since I'm still hung up with the fact that the co-ops fought so hard to say, we're not part of this, we're exempt from it, it's an Evergy-only bill, and now the co-ops want back in. I want to hear from the co-ops, I want to hear from munis that they are good with the language on this thing. If that is permissible, I'd love to have whoever wants to stand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I lost rock, paper, scissors to go first. Reagan McLeod, Kansas Electric Cooperatives. I want to be clear, we didn't say we wanted to get back in, but we are okay with the compromise language. The Senate side expressed a pretty strong desire to get everybody back in, so we worked with them to find a way that we could be okay with being back in. And so we're okay with this. But it wasn't something that we outwardly told, hey, we want back in really bad, if that makes it clear.
No, I appreciate that. Do you guys have any questions for him while he's here?
Did you say that you were waiting to see if they're okay, if you guys are okay to be back in? Is that what you said? You're
Yeah,
trying to-
in this form, we're okay with being back in here, correct?
Okay, but initially you guys were not.
In the bill's original form,
Right.
we did not want to be in it.
Okay. Just was.
So am I correct that it would be part of a budget for a cooperative if they are going to make any expenditures to provide charging stations?
That's correct. And Mr. Chairman, you would also ask several times, well, then who oversees that? It would be the member-elected board of the co-op who oversees that. We haven't done very many of these, and I would venture to guess that if a board put in a charger at X amount of dollars and that cost was spread amongst the membership, a lot of those board members are not going to be reelected in 2 years. So explaining that to the membership is kind of the name of the game, but that's where the oversight piece comes from on that.
Thank you. Ms. Savati?
Good evening. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify the municipal utilities position, and it is correct that as the bill moved through the legislative process, that there was the hope and desire that municipal utilities would not be included in this legislation for a variety of reasons. After it passed the House, we were supportive of the House language. We know that there was a desire on the part of the Senate to ensure that all retail electric providers were included in this bill. And so assuming that the language, our main concern with Senate Bill 380 and its various forms related to the fact that if we were ever mandated to deploy fast charging stations, that we could recover the costs. And so that's why striking Section C, if we were going to be brought back into the bill, was so important to the municipal utilities, because that does allow for us to recover costs in a mandated situation. We have no intent to compete with the convenience stores that we are the ones that provide the power to, that provide the, for charging. So, but again, if we were in a mandated situation, ensuring that we had the ability to recover those costs was very important. And to the question about regulation, the regulation of all of the decision-making by the electric utility is made by either the city councils themselves, the publicly elected city council, or in the case of 3 utilities, municipally owned utilities in the state, by the elected boards of public utility. So there is all of that public accountability and rate-making oversight.
So Kimberly, you're okay with the language as it is?
Apologize for not clarifying. Yes, as it is currently put forth before you all, Kansas Municipal Utilities is okay with this language.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Larry Ann, would you have anything to say on it?
Thank you, committee. I'm Larry Ann Brown. I represent the Americans for Affordable Clean Energy. We've worked on this bill for probably over a year and a half through its various stages and making it through the Senate and the House, and now we're finally to this point, and I know that we would just appreciate moving this issue forward, and I appreciate being able to speak.
Yeah. Would Evergy, Laura's back there in the back trying to hide from us. Come on down.
Thank you, committee. Laura Lutz, Evergy, and we are just fine with the language as it exists in the Senate position.
Which
Yeah.
I kind of thought you were, because I knew you were originally a little distraught when it went from an overall bill to just an Evergy bill.
Yeah.
And I remember visiting with you on that. So figure you'd probably be fine with it, so.
Appreciate your concern there, and our desire was that if we were ever mandated to install in underserved areas, that we would still be able to recover costs there.
Okay. All right. Would KCC want to say anything? You don't have to, but, okay, you're fine. All right. Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you for that. I feel like this is an important issue to address if we want to encourage more electric charging across the state. And I hope we are all back to address this again, because I think it's going to be a continuing discussion. And so I don't see this as the last decision we're going to be making about how to deal with EV chargers. But I think it's a really important step to move forward.
I absolutely agree with you on that. So, and I appreciate your input on it. So, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman and committee, I want to thank you guys because this was short notice, got thrown at you. We know how times are around here lately, so just trying to get something worked out with time. So I want to say thank you to all three of you.
And it was short notice on me.
It was.
I didn't know. I just got back here
And I apologize.
3:30 today. So
I apologize for that.
no problem. Mr. Peterson, anything? We know you're good, but do you have anything to say? You're the best. Okay. What about you guys?
Echo what Senator Francisco talked about, and that is we'll be revisiting this in time. It needs to be.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this conference committee. I do want to second the fact that we should be visiting this, at a later date. I mean, this is just the first step. So I want to appreciate the work of everyone. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have another one, don't we, Nick? Talk about the yearly deal. You want to describe that one to us? We got another one we want to throw at you a little easier. We've been saving this one. See how thick this is coming at you here? So, yeah. This was brought to my attention like a day ago, so this is kind of a quickie deal too. Mr. Myers, you want to talk to this one, please?
So committee, as I said in the opening, you still have Senate Bill 380 that you have hit an agreement on, but you also have Senate Bill number 92 that's a shell from last year. So both of those could be vehicles for this. This is extending, if you look, there's a lot of language here. This is the parallel generation statute. If you look on page 9, that is the change that's occurring in this parallel generation statute. So what this is doing, if you recall last year, there was significant changes to parallel generation law. And in this particular subsection, this subsection does two things. It states that a utility, so this is all utilities in the state subject to parallel generation. They're all subject to this law. They shall not be required to make parallel generation service available to certain larger load entities, and you see in that subsection I-1, that have a voltage of 34.5 kilovolts or higher, so they don't have to make parallel generation service available to them. And then also in that subsection I-2, when determining a utility's peak demand for how much parallel generation service that utility has to make available, any entity that's above that, large load entity that's above the 35.5 kV or higher electric load, essentially does not get factored into that peak demand threshold. So that doesn't open up extra parallel generation with those large load entities. Now, those two provisions had a sunset or an expiration date applied to them. And as you can see, those two would expire July 1, 2026, and this would extend it by 1 year to 2027. So for those large load entities, again, the utility would not be required to make the parallel generation service available, and they would not have to factor that into peak demand.
Mr. Chairman.
So just to reiterate, out of the whole document, which is several pages, it's just the one change, page 9, line 3, I guess, or section 3, or whatever you want to call it.
That is
It's
correct.
the only change. Right?
That's the only change, Mr. Chairman.
Now, you're putting this in to a shall, or what are we doing here? Because this one did not get heard, correct?
Yes, that's correct. You do have a Senate shell, Senate Bill 92, that's available if that's the choice of the committee, but yeah.
Okay. So this is the only thing that would be in Senate Bill 92 after we do this? Okay.
So maybe our revisor can just explain what would happen if these were to expire in 2026? That means, so this is needed because?
So what would happen is utilities would be required to make parallel generation service available to larger load entities that are above that 34.5 kV threshold. And then if you recall in parallel generation statutes, utilities are subject to a cap that they have to make available, and it's a cap that grows by the year. So on the page 8, you can see that commencing on July 1, 2026, the parallel generation cap for all facilities that are parallel generating is 7% of the utility's historic peak demand, and then in 2027 it bumps up to 8% for each year thereafter. This would make parallel generation service to those larger load entities, which could then impact how much is available under that cap, and then also it would factor into the cap also those larger load entities that come online. So when you're determining peak demand, those large load entities would be factored into that cap as well, starting in 2026.
I think there was some that wanted 2 years, and it ended up being 1 year. But they've checked around, or I have the interested parties and that kind of thing. I couldn't find anybody really objecting to that either, so. I mean the 1 year too. Well,
So I think this is probably another issue that would be good to discuss either during an interim or certainly during next year, because we don't want to be changing this 1 year at a time without really having a hearing and a discussion about where we are. And particularly since we're working, and we know the KCC has been establishing some tariffs for large loads. So it might be good to get some information about how those tariffs fit into what's happening here. Because of that, I like the idea of 1 year.
And this caught somebody's eye here just recently. So So this is something we should have probably been working on earlier. So we'll be ready for this next year.
So we're fine on the House side.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, I got one more here now.
yeah.
I want to thank you guys. You guys are kind of tough negotiators. Okay, if there's nothing else, I think we've got our business done for today. Thank you very much, and meeting adjourned.